This is how it goes. You know how it goes. Then it's just a race to the next guy and the next guy. And before you know it, you've got guys that have no business being one and dones getting drafted into the NFL. It'd be horrible. The NFL would suffer. College football would suffer. And I hate Dennis Dodd, but I love you guys. Talk to you later. I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championship, season of dreams.
So JUCK over.
And if we allow them to devalue it, we lose a lot of what makes college football special. Don't let them do it. Don't let them devalue what it means to you. The Ohio State Buckeyes, the 2024 national champs, will be remembered for how they came out of that. And welcome to JUCK on Bucks, the weekend show. Appreciate you guys so much for joining me. Valentine's Day was last night, gentlemen, and this is a 95% male audience here at JUCK on Bucks, the lady fans. We've got a handful, and they are awesome JUCK guys, but there's just a couple of them. 95% dudes. I don't know why that is. I guess they just don't like to watch the YouTube videos. I'm not crude. I certainly don't say anything nasty. But Valentine's Day, I hope you nailed it. I hope your women are happy. I did double duty, as forgetting Valentine's Day would be pretty devastating for me. It's also my Nina's birthday, so I have never forgotten it. I have a perfect record on Valentine's Day. I did forget the anniversary one time. I forgot it once, and she even had us get married on 11/11 to make sure I would never forget it. But if you ask me, going 24 out of 25 and remembering that date is pretty damn good. Like, that's 92%. In any walk of life, that is a very successful clip. So, anyway, I wanted to do something that I did last year as we get into the off season here. There's not always news. There's not always fun stuff to talk about. But last year, we went through every single position group and we discussed the coach, how he's recruited, all the players in the room, the leaders in the room, the trajectory, the momentum, and kind of how that group ranks amongst the country. For instance, wide receivers, we would go through everybody and say, number one, this is the best wide receiver room in the country, and it is number one on the team. So when we do this, I'm doing it in terms of the goal is to win a national championship. How are we stacking up in every area on the team against the other 3, 4, 5 best teams in the nation? So I'm doing this with no bias towards Buckeye players because I like them more because they play for Ohio State. No bias for Buckeye coaches. We're just looking objectively at other rooms in the country, at the best coaches in the country, and how our Buckeyes stack up in that particular room. Now, if you're not a member of that elite unit group, for instance, we look at the tight ends last year. That certainly wasn't an elite group. It wasn't what we would call a national championship tight end room. But that doesn't mean that you can't win a national championship with a room like that or a couple rooms like that, as we see. They won a national championship with a tight end unit that coming into the season certainly did not look anywhere near championship caliber, just from that unit's perspective. And we were hoping that we would see maybe Jelani Thurman emerge. That didn't happen. Those guys got better and better as the year went on. So today, we're going to talk about tight ends. Now, important to say right off the rip, every one of these rooms at Ohio State is going to be a top 10, top 12 unit in the country. And that's great. We're talking first world problems here. Okay, we're just judging which ones have the room for the most improvement and which ones don't. For instance, you can't improve the wide receiver room. It would be impossible to improve that wide receiver room. But there is a big difference between a top 15 unit and a national championship caliber top 3 linebacker unit, for instance. So how many of these top 5, top 3 national championship caliber units can you stack on your team? That is the difference, in my opinion, between teams like Ohio State and Georgia and Texas and Oregon and teams like Ole Miss and South Carolina. Teams like South Carolina and Ole Miss, they can pop up and they can beat you on any given day, anybody in the country, because they have certain areas on their team that are championship level. But Ohio State, Texas, Georgia, these teams have more of those units. And if you played them 10 times, Ole Miss versus Ohio State's going to win 7 or 8 of them. So we're clear. Everything's great at Ohio State. Nobody sucks. Nobody's complaining. Nobody's whining. Objective analysis. Which rooms, which groups have the most room to improve? Which ones are top 3 in the country? And just like I did last year, I'm going to remove my fandom and just look at everything through the lens of how does it stack up against the best in the country? And we're going to do that with every position group. As we go into it, I want to go over some things that I said last year in these prediction kind of episodes. How did we hit? How many did we hit? How many did we miss? What were we right on? What were we wrong on? The offensive line coming into the year, I thought was going to be a top 5 offensive line unit in the country. Many were saying they thought this was going to be the biggest liability on the team. I totally disagreed. And up until the Oregon game, where Simmons went down, I think it was unequivocally, I think it was a top 3 offensive line in the country. So we nailed that one. The tight end room, a little on the negative side here. I thought that the tight end room looked like the least talented room on the team. And I did not think that it was going to be anywhere near a championship level unit. Now, credit to Keenan Bailey, because by the end of that year, the tight end room looked very good. And they definitely played their butts off. And we'll talk about Keenan a little more later when we get into that tight end room. But I was half wrong on that. Ohio State, not Georgia, was the most talented team in the country and should be the national championship favorite. I dug in on that one. I got called out even by several Buckeyes, including my brother's father-in-law. Yeah. And I was called a ridiculous homer. I was called a ridiculous homer for saying that. That proved to be unequivocally true, and everybody admits at this point Ohio State was without a doubt the most talented team in the country and should have been the national championship favorite all along. I said Luke Montgomery would be the starting right guard. Now, that didn't happen. I was wrong on that. I'll take the L. I'll own the L. But when we look at the end of the season, when we look at the playoffs, I'm not so sure if that might not have been the better option all year if Luke was starting at right guard over Tegra. I said that Cody Simon was the best linebacker on the team when the debate was going on. Should he be grandfathered into that position? Why is it Sonny Styles and CJ Hicks fighting over here when they can both play at the same time? My opinion was I did not believe CJ Hicks had it at linebacker when we were told widely by the beat that it was finally clicking for CJ. It certainly didn't, and he certainly doesn't have it. He won't play that position next year, his final year with the team. He'll move down to edge. And I got further predictions on that when we get to the defensive line room. Edric Houston would be a monster. He was a monster. I hit on that. I missed on Will Kazmarek. I really overestimated Will Kazmarek's film. I thought he was going to be just a bit better, a bit more fluid athletically, and I thought he was going to make a real difference. And while he did contribute, not in the way I predicted, I touted his praises quite a bit, and I missed on that. I also missed on Mitchell Melton. I still believe in Mitchell Melton as a player. He's going to be playing for Virginia this upcoming season. I think he's going to do really well, but he couldn't get himself on the field to make a serious impact this year, and I definitely missed on that. And Hero Canoe. I thought Hero was ready. I thought Hero was ready to take the next step and be a real force on the inside. We saw Hero get pushed around sometimes, and he definitely didn't get himself into the mix. He actually got passed over by Caden McDonald, who's a pretty special young player, but I thought we'd see better out of Hero. And now Hero going to be playing for Texas coming into the shoe week 1. I was right about G. Scott. G. Scott's blocking was a liability, and it was a liability until it wasn't, because G. Scott continued to improve throughout the year. I didn't think he could. I didn't think he had it in him. I didn't think he had the ability or the rear end for it, so to speak, but he did. So I was ultimately wrong on that one, and I couldn't be happier to be wrong about one, because G is an awesome guy, and I'm so happy that now he may actually have the opportunity to play in the NFL based on the second half of the season and how he performed in the playoffs, looking like a real well-rounded tight end. I was right about Sam Williams-Dixon. I'm still right about Sam Williams-Dixon, who is a really nice dude, and I love Ohio kids playing for Ohio State, as you know. Everybody was very excited about his spring game, busting off a run where the linebacker got tripped up by a referee. He's just a guy. He's a nice kid. He is not as talented as walk-on TC Caffey, another Ohio kid. He wasn't as talented as Dallin Hayden, who couldn't crack the starting lineup at Colorado. And he went and entered the portal. He entered the portal when the two starting running backs went to the NFL, which means the next man up was sophomore James Peoples. Why do you suppose that was? He has since withdrawn his name from the portal because it didn't work out the way he thought it would. And I literally heard people talking about him being the number 3 back after CJ Donaldson and James Peoples. If Sam Williams-Dixon is the number 3 back on this team in 2025, that means Carlos Loughlin missed on Bo Jackson, Isaiah West, and Turbo Rogers. Every one of those freshmen are more talented than him. And if you think that Carlos Loughlin went out and recruited those 3 guys to play them behind a guy that he didn't recruit, who's not as talented, and entered the portal after a year of his coaching, you got your homer goggles on, or you're just wishful thinking for the local guy. That's not happening. So, believe it or not, we see a dozen guys enter the portal every year, a dozen to 20. And many of those guys realize that they're not going to play at Ohio State. Some feel because it's a coaching decision. Some realize they're just a little out of their league. So, look, like I said, this is not always going to be positive when we go over guys like this. We're going over it with a fine-tooth comb with a critical eye. So as I was about to sit down and do my notes for this, news comes out yesterday that there's a report from Letterman Row on 3's Ohio State site. Alex Gleitman talks about a source that he spoke with about Larry Johnson. And he said that Ryan Day and Larry Johnson sat down and had a conversation. Now, every time we talk about Larry Johnson and the potential ending of his career here on the show, it becomes a very sensitive topic for quite a few of you. And I understand that. So I'm going to go with this, tread lightly, right? I don't understand personally why people get latched on to position coaches and view them as like part of the team. I never have. To me, that is just a profession that by nature is kind of transient, not very loyal. So if you're not a Brian Hartline or a Tim Walton or a James Laurinaitis, a former Buckeye who's in Columbus because that's where you want to be, then you're somebody who's just climbing the career ladder and it's just a stop for you. So I don't get attached to them. I don't put them on a pedestal. I don't view them as part of the team. They're not part of the crew to me. I understand how some view a guy like Larry Johnson differently, but most of these guys, by the time they get to Ohio State, they're making a ton of money. With that comes high demands, and that's the way I look at them. Now, Alex Gleitman's report. He says sources told him Larry Johnson and Ryan Day had a meeting, and Day communicated to Johnson that he is welcome back as long as there is full alignment between him and the new defensive staff, which pretty much says you can come back if you want, but I'm not going to tolerate any of the animosity that went on between you and Jim Knowles with you and the new guy. Now, Matt Patricia comes in. Matt Patricia is a guy who you can't really pigeonhole into what's he going to run. He's run a 3-4, a 4-3. He works with his personnel the way he sees fit. And we can assume that we're going to see, based on Ryan Day's statements last year, a whole lot more multiplicity with the front seven. This is Patricia's specialty. He's going to throw different looks at him. Is he going to find a way to use CJ Hicks different, play some kind of hybrid position? And is Larry going to want to stay and work through that, which he definitely fought back against? Jim Knowles wanted to run a 4-man front at all times. And that was the crux of the beginning of the issue between the two of them that just seemed to get bigger and bigger. So Larry's got a decision to make, knowing he's got a new defensive coordinator coming in. And the head coach has let him know, look, you're welcome, but we're not going to tolerate any of that stuff anymore. This puts Ryan Day in a less than ideal situation that I certainly don't envy. Larry has signed a 2-year contract before last year, which means he's under contract through this season of 2025. If Larry retires now, I imagine we'll probably hear that soon. Many speculate that he was waiting to see who that defensive coordinator was to decide what he was going to do. And now that the answer is Patricia, I feel like that would lean him more towards retirement. if we're just going to guess, because we know that Patricia is going to change up the fronts, and we know that that was a big sticking point for Larry. So that would make me think maybe he's going to. But, you never know. It would seem to me like if you're 73 and you just had this perfect season with a crew of guys that you coached all the way to their senior year, they came back for their senior year, they kicked butt in the playoffs, and you just kind of walk out on top. It would seem to be a good spot from that context, but you never know what's in somebody's heart or what their priorities are. So I'm anxious to see what he's going to do. But I wanted to make sure I had a conversation with somebody else's point of view. So Chris and I are going to have that conversation tomorrow, and it's going to be a good one. And like I said, whenever I bring up Larry, a lot of comments, a lot of visceral reactions. A lot of people are very loyal to Larry. I'm going to get 20 comments under this video that are going to say, Larry has the right to hang it up whenever the hell he pleases. And this mentality that is just kind of like this knee-jerk thing that people say about legends of the sport is very flawed, in my opinion. It's a flawed way to run a billion-dollar business, which is what Ohio State football is. You earn your next college football contract. There are no lifetime achievement extensions. That's not the way this works. And the logic of anybody earning the right to call it quits when they want is what led to, and I'm not talking about Larry here, but it's what led to Joe Paterno running by me in the shoe after soiling his trousers on the sideline. It's what led to Bobby Bowden staying 5 years too long at Florida State and running into the ground, because their athletic directors and their fans had that attitude that this guy's done so much for the program, he's earned the right to call it quits when he wants, even if he was putting the program into a bit of purgatory towards the end of his career. We saw it at both Florida State. We saw it at Penn State. And that's why I am vehemently against that attitude of anybody in the coaching profession having that kind of he can just take off whenever he pleases, even if his performance is suffering, if it's regressing. And the truth is, when you've got a guy like that, a coach regressing, and again, I'm not talking about Larry, just talking about this mentality here. If you've got a coach that is regressing as he gets older and you're keeping him on as a legend, it reminds me of like an injured player telling the coach that they can go. Coach, I can go. I can go. And coach lets him go out there. Well, he's at 70%, 70% because he's injured. And his 70% is not as good as 100% of his backup, which means you're getting less production from that player on the field. So even though he says he wants to go, you're losing out on production you could potentially have by a replacement. And that's why I'm just against that. I'm against it. But of course, I'm not saying Larry has regressed. We'll do that full breakdown tomorrow with Chris, and we'll go over it. How has the recruiting been? How's the recruiting trend? How is the development trend? How do we factor in the financial stuff when it comes to recruiting? Has he gotten the same support other positions have had? And we're going to talk about all that. And that should be a really good conversation. But the ones of you who are going to say that he has earned the right to stay as long as he wants, you don't even mean it. You really don't mean it, because here's the deal. What if I said Larry's going to stay till he's 85 years old? You're going to change your mind. You're not going to let somebody age and stay as long as they want, right? So you got a line too. Everybody's got a line. It's just about where that line is. So today we are going to go over tight ends. Let's start with Keenan Bailey. Keenan Bailey, coach of the tight ends. I came into 2024 with a very skeptical outlook on Keenan Bailey, on how he would do. And a lot of that was, you're giving this guy his first coaching job, his first position group, and he's never coached a position before. And it's also the least talented group on the team. That doesn't sound like setting him up for success. So I was very skeptical. Now, important to say, at the time, I didn't feel about Ryan Day the way I feel now when it comes to hiring assistant coaches. Now, he always gets a huge benefit of the doubt from me. And that's why I feel the way I feel about the Matt Patricia hire. But at that point, it was like, this doesn't sound so hot. So Keenan Bailey takes over a room that includes G. Scott as a senior, 5-star wide receiver who has morphed himself into a tight end. He brings in from the MAC, Ohio University, Will Kazmarek. He has Bennett Christian coming back off of a year suspension from PEDs. Christian Bennett was a 4-star, top 250 player in the country in the class of 2022, a top 10 tight end. And then you've got Jelani Thurman, the wild card, another kid out of Georgia like Christian Bennett, who was the number 3 tight end in his class, top 70 overall player, 6'6", 260. And that was your wild card right there. Then you got Max LeBlanc as a freshman, 4-star, top 225 kid out of, 6'4", 227, top 300 player. And he was a top tight end in the country as well, coming from Tennessee. So when you look at this room, you obviously got the freak Jelani Thurman. Can you get this guy to pop or not? Then you got G. Scott, the leader of the room, Christian Bennett, Will Kazmarek, and that's the 4 you're going to play. And to me, it was the least exciting room on the team if you couldn't get Jelani Thurman ready. And when we look at Jelani Thurman, a lot of people criticized Keenan Bailey throughout the year for him not being ready, not playing as much, and not making an impact that many thought he could. But I think it was pretty clear that Ryan Day, who called Jelani Thurman out publicly in a way that made me feel like he wanted Jelani to hear what he said, and then doubled back a couple weeks later and said how he had done a good job publicly, that Jelani was not quite ready, whether that's his focus or just the amount of stuff that needs to be learned when you are a blocking tight end and a receiving tight end. It's a lot of stuff to learn. And Day said he thinks outside of quarterback, tight end is the toughest spot to learn in his offense. I'll take his word for it. Jelani was just in year 2. So he really didn't impact the team much. But Bennett Christian turned into be an excellent blocking tight end. Will Kazmarek, pretty well-rounded, but limited. And G. Scott, throughout the year, better receiver and a better blocker, which I didn't think was possible. So all in all, in an offense that used the tight ends quite a bit, I think they had a great attitude. I think they were tough. And I think they played damn good down the stretch. And that is a big credit to Keenan Bailey in 2024. Now, heading into 2025, this tight end room looks totally different. This offseason, Keenan Bailey acquires Max Clare from the portal out of Purdue. Kid from Ohio, passed over by the Buckeyes coming out of high school, goes and makes himself at Purdue. He goes and makes his bones at Purdue, and now he gets the call back, come on home, as the number 1 tight end in the country in that transfer portal. And this guy's a weapon. This is a receiving weapon. This is a dude who is like a slot receiver in a big dude's body. So totally different guy than you had last year on the roster. And now you've got Jelani Thurman in year 3. Can this big, long stud athlete make it happen this year? And just by virtue of having those 2 huge weapons, suddenly this room looks very talented. Now you also have Will Kazmarek, a well-rounded but limited guy, back for his final year of eligibility, and Christian Bennett, who is just a mauling blocker. Those 4 guys, that looks really good. No idea what Max LeBlanc's going to be, but who did Keenan Bailey bring in the recruiting class? Who's going to join those 4 and Max LeBlanc? He brought in the number 1 tight end on his board in Nate Roberts, a guy who had been committed to Notre Dame. Important to say this. Nate Roberts, not a top 10 tight end. He was at one point. He moved back. So not rated super highly. Keenan Bailey did his own evaluation, and he chose this guy. And all I want from these position coaches is for them to do their evaluations and go get their number 1 target. And if you can land your number 1 target, then you're doing a damn good job. You're doing a great job. Let's hope your evaluation was right. So he goes and lands his number one target out of Oklahoma. Kid who has a brother that plays for Oklahoma and grew up 15 minutes away from Oklahoma. That's impressive. And he was tenacious about it. And he was so singularly focused on Nate Roberts that he was missing out on some guys right around here. Luka Gilbert went down to play for Miami. He's 6'7" tight end. Brock Schott out of Indiana was also high on his board. He goes down to Miami. So you're losing these guys because you're singularly focused. And I was starting to worry because Nate Roberts had been committed to Notre Dame and flipped out of that commitment. And then he committed to Ohio State. And I was thinking, man, if this guy ends up flipping again, now you got a situation. But Nate Roberts held true. Let's talk about Nate Roberts. We're talking about a big dude. I mean, this kid is built like Gronkowski. He can run, he can catch, he can block. He has the body that can play college football with one off season, one spring, one winter workout with Ohio State. This dude can be ready to go next year. Now, I don't think there's going to be much room for him. Who's he going to play over? He's not going to play over Jelani. He's not going to play over Christian Bennett, I wouldn't think, or Will. Like, I don't think he's going to play much, but he could. And he's a stud. But that's not all. He identifies Brody Lennon. Brody Lennon is a freaky athlete. This guy got clocked by one of those. I did a short on it once. He got clocked by one of those companies that does the metrics of how fast guys are running on the field. And they pulled up Bo Jackson. I'm sorry, I did that. They had done one of Bo Jackson, running back, burner, and they did one of Brody Lennon. Brody Lennon and Bo Jackson clocked the same on their software. Now, I don't trust one software to the next, right? I just have a feeling like some of these are not calibrated properly. So let's say, for instance, Ohio State says this guy ran this fast, 22.3 miles an hour. And I see this software and it says this really fast guy ran 20.5 miles an hour. Well, these aren't adding up. These are both really fast guys. That's too much of a difference. But I saw the same company using the same software clock Brody Lennon and Bo Jackson. Both were running the same. Let me pull up Brody. This is Brody at 6'4", 220 out of Gates Mills, Gilmore Academy up here in my neck of the woods. 3-star in 247, a 4-star in the composite. He didn't earn that 4-star till after Ohio State came calling. Number 17 tight end in the country per them. This dude is athletically gifted enough to play defense at Ohio State. That's a physical freak right here. I am so excited for these two tight ends. I think Keenan Bailey nailed it, knocked it out of the park. And usually I am a skew towards the rankings guy, but I also extensively watch the film. And I've always felt that tight end, like offensive line, is a position that's very difficult to predict how good guys are going to be. There's other positions like edge rusher, for instance. You can see the difference between the top, the 5-star edge rusher and the mid-range 4-star edge rusher. Like, it is drastically apparent. Pretty easy position to evaluate. Tight end, much tougher. Somehow, these two are not getting the respect they deserve, in my opinion. And I could not be happier. I couldn't be happier with the two tight ends he's brought in. So you got these two guys coming aboard. And he didn't stop there, as he is one of the few coaches at Ohio State who has a commitment in the class of 2026. And that is this gentleman right here, Corbin Fordham, out of the Bulls School in Jacksonville, Florida. He is composite, a 4-star, 360, number 18 tight end. Now, that is going to shoot up the board. We're talking about a guy that was coveted by Georgia, Michigan, many other big schools. A lot of people wanted this guy, and he is a gifted pass catcher, a gifted pass catching tight end in the mold of a Max Clare. So he's getting well-rounded guys. He's getting bigger targets, skinnier target. He's mixing it up with different kind of body styles, and he's getting his dudes. These guys want to be Buckeyes. He's an infectious guy. I love the direction of this tight end room. And when we look at the tight end room heading into 2025, is it championship level? Is it one of the best in the country? Is it going to be a top 5 unit in the country with Max Clare, Jelani Thurman, Christian Bennett, Will Kazmarek, those freshmen? I think it's definitely going to be a top 5 room in the country, but a lot of that is contingent on Jelani Thurman taking that next step forward. If he does, it's without a doubt a top 3 room in the country. If Jelani Thurman can take that next step. And if Keenan Bailey sticks around as the tight end coach for several years, now that he's co-offensive coordinator, I mean, sky's the limit here, man. This guy looks like the real deal. He looks like the real deal. Ryan Day nailed it with promoting him to tight ends coach. I'm very happy that he's sticking around and now co-offensive coordinator. Could not be happier about the state of the tight end room. We will rank it with the other position groups when we get done with those. And tomorrow, we're going to the defensive line. The defensive line is this one's going to be probably a bit longer of a discussion than this one because there's a lot more to talk about when it comes to Larry and the potential end of his career, etc. So we'll get on that tomorrow. Now, before I go, I want to ask you to please subscribe and like the channel if you haven't. And I also want to talk about Dennis Dodd. Dennis Dodd, the reporter from CBS who wrote the article that I did a segment on last month after the game. And essentially he said that Ryan Day should win the national championship and then tell everybody to screw off and quit his job because he doesn't need any of this. And Ryan Day is also, he said he was motivated by the things people were saying. That was his main motivation, as if he knows what the hell his motivation is. He compared Ohio State fans who wanted Ryan Day fired to the insane psychopaths that were threatening Ryan Day, just kind of lumped them all together, which is extremely unprofessional, in my opinion, to lump criminals in with sports fans who have a take you disagree with. It was just a trash article, and it was comical and ridiculous. So this guy has written another piece, and he is urging the discussion on Jeremiah Smith taking the NFL to court to be able to forego the 3 years of you have to wait till 3 years after high school before you can enter the draft. He is urging the discussion to move forward that Jeremiah Smith should challenge this rule to get himself to the NFL early because clearly he can play. And he goes through a list of 5 or 6 guys throughout the course of history, like Adrian Peterson and Herschel Walker, Marcus Dupree, guys that we know could have played as freshmen in the NFL. There's been 5 or 6 blatantly obvious ones. Jeremiah Smith is among that club. So he's pushing him to take it to court, and try to follow in Maurice Claret's footsteps, which doesn't sound like a great plan to me. Of course, JJ doesn't have any other issues, but he even went so far as to ask Maurice what he thought. And Maurice told him, I think he should not follow in my footsteps. The money's going to be there. Enjoy the time at Ohio State. And as we know, JJ's got that insurance policy, which covers him if he breaks his leg stepping off a curb. They don't give that to freshmen, just a couple in the history of that type of insurance. He's fully covered. There's no reason for him to go other than in Dodd's eyes to challenge the rule, number one, and to get to that second contract, as Dodd says, that should be his goal. Again, Dodd doesn't know what his goals are. And this dude is making a lot of money right now and becoming a huge star. In fact, I would say that staying in college for 3 years makes this guy and his legend grow so much more, dominating college football for that span of time, that by the time he gets to the NFL, being much more prepared, bursting onto the scene as a top dude immediately in the NFL is more advantageous financially in the long run than getting to that second contract faster. I would argue that. And I think that's a spot on argument that I just thought of just now. So pat on the back for JUCK. Anyway, my point is this guy is a menace. He's a menace, and I can't stand him for putting this out there in the universe. And we're going to see these people continue to push this. We're going to see them continue to push this. And the truth is, the NFL and the NFL Players Association agreed on this rule. And thank goodness for them, because they are protecting not just college football, but the NFL. We saw this in basketball. It killed it. It killed it. The only reason people still watch college basketball is because of the structure of the tournament. That's it. The one and done killed college basketball. Not only did it lower the product in college basketball, it lowered the product in the NBA. It lowered them both. So thank goodness that the NFLPA and the NFL are steadfast in agreement with this. It is so great. If we were to start getting one and dones, you know how it goes. Yeah, it starts with just the uber talented guys. It starts with them. Then it starts with all the GMs in the NFL saying, well, I'm looking at this Bo Jackson. He's a freshman at Ohio State. He's not ready. But if we don't get him, somebody else is going to get him. We could probably get him for a steal this year in the 6th round. He's got all the measurables. He's got the speed. Let's just take him. This is how it goes. You know how it goes. Then it's just a race to the next guy and the next guy. And before you know it, you've got guys that have no business being one and dones getting drafted into the NFL. It'd be horrible. The NFL would suffer. College football would suffer. And I hate Dennis Dodd, but I love you guys. Talk to you later. Juck and Bucks out.